Alex, get out the confetti, get out the party poppers. Xbox doubled year on year in June for hardware sales. Welcome to the weekly download. Hello. Welcome back to the weekly download, brought to you by Big Games Machine. I'm Tom, your host, and I'm joined again by Alex. I feel like we are part of the furniture. We are the furniture.
Yeah, we're the normal two. We're the two that
the normal two. Are we?
Cut out a bit of time in our week to do this. You mostly. I've now moved my little recording studio in here, so sorry for last time's audio.
Yeah,
you used to that.
I think I said before, it's like the going back to the COVID years and all the libraries of bookshelves that were in people's backgrounds on the news. But no, we are back. I'm aware in the last few weeks we've done some episodes. We've not done other episodes. Last week, Alex and I were both at Develop Brighton for some sun, some conversations, and a lot of. Alex, do you have any quick thoughts on Develop before we get into today's stories?
It was. I mean, it continues to be one. I think it has the advantage of being one of the UK shows that's a little bit casual's the wrong term, but a little less formal in terms of meeting. So you have the people you do meet are a lot more. It's a lot less business. It's kind of like you have a chat about the games, and it feels really productive there, and it's a good sharing of ideas in a way that there's conferences like that around the world, obviously, but that's the UK one where we find our base, which is lovely, and it's obviously by the beach, which is also lovely, but it did feel a little. I think the show floor looked a bit quieter, but the big indie treasures had an amazing set of games. I know you spent more time at that than me, Tom. But great to see so many small indie.
Yeah, we mentioned it in our new formatted weekly newsletter last week, the weekly download.
Brilliant indie treasures, not big indie treasures. I keep getting that wrong. Sorry, Jupiter would come for me with that one.
Sorry, Jupiter. We're trying. And we'll put a link to the showcase in the description. But no, Develop was fun. Develop was sunny. I think, though, what we'll do is we'll start looking at today's stories, because people aren't here for our stories. They're here for the stories, the big stories that have driven the conversations in the industry this week. And we'll start with this story not from Nintendo, but about Nintendo, which is all to do with the tariffs, no tariffs, Switch 2 price increases. Is it staying this much? Is it not? But essentially, Nintendo has said that it has no legal duty to pass tariff refunds onto customers and consumers. This is specifically in the US for the big boring background on this, but it is quite interesting. In March, the US Supreme Court ruled that the tariffs were illegally implemented, and then in response, 1,000 companies, Nintendo of which are one, sued the US government to recover refunds from the costs they've paid with tariffs. Obviously, now some consumers have seized an opportunity here that they've seen. This is led by Gregory Hoffert from California and Prashant Sharan from Washington. They filed a class action lawsuit against Nintendo saying, hey, if you're getting these refunds, you should refund us on that additional cost. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. Nintendo has now filed a motion, which is why it's back in the news again, to say, you paid, we told you how much it was going to cost. You paid that. You didn't complain. And they also said that the price hikes weren't just... Yeah, in essence, that part of it, you didn't have to buy this. And also the price increase wasn't just because of the tariffs. It was memory shortage. It was additional shipping costs. It was additional labor costs. So Nintendo seems quite clear here. We're getting this money back. It's not going to you because, as you said, Alex, if you didn't want to pay that price, it's a free market. You don't have to. So do you have any thoughts on this?
It's a difficult one. And I think the place that I want to start my complaint is that I think that a lot of the American market don't understand that they tend to get better prices than a lot of the rest of the world on these things. Like, we tend to pay more for tech. Most of Europe does. And, you see the one that always stuck in my craw was Destiny updates, because we paid pound for dollar, which meant we were paying 30% more. And that was just the way it was. And in this case, I'm pretty sure
for the
America,
expansions, do you mean like the DLC? So.
Yeah. So you sit in this kind of place where, the US is already often paying less overall. So, someone's absorbing that cost. And also my recollection is, and I'm having a quick look, it's hard to track exactly what it was, but essentially some of that some of the cost. Well, as you said, like there's
Alex
also
is coming in with some unsourced claims.
Well, it everywhere absorbed some of the cost because they wanted to try and maintain price parity across regions. Because partly because they don't want to start force an import market off the back of it, right? Because at some point things get a bit wonky there, and obviously also in that you've got the memory at the same time. So they're probably like, oh, well, we can probably absorb some of that cost into upping everybody's and smoothing it all out. So while I absolutely sympathise with what the Gregory and Pichon are going for here, I do think maybe it's a little, and I appreciate that Nintendo are making this claim in the US, but it does feel so US centric. And if the US then had to start refunding, or if Nintendo then had to start refunding that globally, then it'd be great if we all got 20% off a game or something, but that's what it would end up looking like. There's no way.
I remember in the good old 3DS games where no one bought a 3DS at launch, so they gave us loads of free virtual.
I remember that, yeah.
And it's crazy to me that's 15 years ago that happening. So that is like the history. That's Nintendo history right there. But that won't be happening. Yeah. I wanted to include this because I do think it's an interesting story, but there's not too much else to say on it. It seems that Nintendo's clearly in a position here where there's nothing for them to be concerned about. The tariff situation is something that affects so many organizations and companies that the idea that there's a potential here if Nintendo would somehow lose this, then the precedent that sets is enormous. So I see no way that Nintendo
have they won the money from their case to get from the government.
I don't believe so. So that's still
that only then happens. Yeah, it's like a trickle down effect. Like the worst that can happen is they have to give away some of the money they get back. So.
Yeah, give us 10 years and inflation will have gone that far that the $30 that you're entitled to is worth half a give it another Switch 3 cartridge.
Give it another month and they'll just put up the price. Well, they already are putting up the price on Switches because of memory. I mean, arguably you got a better deal then than you will now. So, I mean,
stop complaining. They might ask for more.
Kind of. Yeah, I'm very anti-consumer on this one. It sounds like, which isn't meant to be my point. But yeah,
Alex might have a BGM shirt on, but we all know that LinkedIn's Nintendo.
My views are my own.
Your views are your own. No, they're not bad views. I think they're the correct views. I'm aware we could speak more on this, but for the sake of time, we definitely could. And if you want more information on this, more analysis, the weekly download newsletter is where you'll find that. We speak a lot more about this story and a lot more data to look at. Speaking of data, move on to our next story. The Switch 2's in there somewhere, of course it is. June 2026 for game spending in the US dropped 21%. Compared to last year, compared to June 25. Hardware, which is the real standout here, hardware for June in the US down 62%. So from $1 billion last year to $383 million. Now, I read this, I wanted to speak about this. I think we need to immediately say, let's look back and think what happened in June last year. We had a record-breaking Switch 2 launch. So the idea that hardware's plummeted 62%, I don't think that's concerning because, hey, you can't have a record-breaking system launching every year. And
are you telling me that the Steam machine hasn't driven the same kind of sales numbers as the Switch 2?
Apparently not. I mean, I remember, I have a Steam Deck for the record, so this isn't
me too.
But I remember people saying, the Steam Deck will compete with the Switch. And I think the Steam Deck sold like 6 million lifetime, so not quite. It's almost like Steam hardware is a niche for people who are into a very specific form of PC gaming. But one thing, I guess what I'll lead you in with, Alex, because I think this kind of sets everything back down to zero, is that year-to-date spending is only 1% down from this time last year. Obviously, the headline is June looks terrible compared to last year, but the reality is that even with the Switch 2 launch last year, we're still on pace with where we are across the whole year.
The world's only got more complicated, but it has. Like, prices are going up around the board. People are more price sensitive than they ever have been, and the price of machines are going up. So I'm not surprised big ticket items like this are people that might have already made that choice, or people who were making do with a PS4, or like a previous, what was the previous Xbox?
The Xbox One.
Xbox One. It was the Xbox One. That feels so long ago.
360,
the Xbox One feels so long ago.
Yeah. Come on, you remember the Xbox One? It's your TV and it plays games.
No.
Come on.
I remember that. I just feel like there's one between the Xbox One and the Xbox Series.
the Xbox One X, that was the powerful.
Okay, yeah. I think it's the fact we can't go back one at a time that makes it feel longer ago somehow. Anyway, doesn't matter. The Xbox, people who are still on those machines are like, well, we're just going to make this continue to work. It's kind of helping make the decision. Because now's the time we would have traditionally seen those machines drop in price.
Do you want some data that supports your point? I think
data.
You're making a very good point. So Switch 2, I know I've just said something about systems that aren't to do with that, but hang on. Switch 2, 79% year-on-year drop. Fairly obvious to predict. It's still number one, though, in units and dollar sales for June and the year overall. PS5 is where things get interesting. Still in second place, but having a 19% year-on-year drop from last June. So that definitely backs what you're saying. We are seeing these price increases and just the age of the system continuing to grow, because that's how it works. It can't get younger, but that's definitely having an effect. Xbox, Alex, get out the confetti. Get out the confetti. Get out the party poppers. Xbox doubled year-on-year in June for hardware sales. So,
I mean, is this proof?
Celebration.
That
well done, Xbox.
Any publicity is good publicity. Because some of it was good. Like they had a really interesting few months, obviously, with Ashley Sharma's various.
It's cheaper than the PS5, though, isn't it? And I know that's always been
cheaper than the PS5
case.
Pro. I don't think it's cheaper than the PS5
I think the base
standard.
Xbox, again, look at us, the games industry podcast, and we cannot remember the exact details. I
don't think about buying a machine apart from the week it comes out, and then it's
yeah, then who cares?
Prices are gone to me.
But that data supports what you're saying. We ran a story in the newsletter last week as our lead story, which was predictions that hardware sales will drop a lot in the next couple of years because it's becoming more expensive and it's harder to shift because the audience of more hardcore players have already engaged with the system 2 or 3 years ago. But one last point to be
the same price for the Series X and the PlayStation, but not the Pro. The Pro is more expensive, at least from a very quick Google while we chat.
Well, either way, Xbox doing okay. Software dipped 12% in June, but subscriptions 7% increase. So just a few more bits. Don't know how much you can really read into that. I mean, we'll be talking a little bit later about software in relation to other things,
but that's also obviously money generated by not the number of sales with software. So you're looking at more people being careful about buying during sales. We know we're seeing a lot of indies becoming a lot more price sensitive and aware that their audience is becoming a lot more price sensitive.
Or maybe secondhand. So, we're seeing an increase in, if you're seeing a 12% drop, and I do think this does include mobile. So that obviously has an effect, but if we are looking at if any of this dip comes from console software,
and where in-app purchases sit on this scale as well, whether they sit in software or we need to interrogate these numbers better next time, Tom.
The in-app purchases are within subscriptions.
Are they? Okay, well then, then that obviously, that's huge then.
Yeah, just a few interesting insights into. Again, I know we've already said this, but the headline's really scary, and then you look at the truth. Well, not the truth, but you look at the data and the reasons why, and it's basically, if this is concerning to you, then you're expecting every single June a record-breaking, highly
there's something happening.
Piece of hardware to launch.
There's something happening this year that's going to probably mean that the first half of the year is irrelevant when it comes to end-of-year numbers as well. Although I don't know where pre-orders.
November is the best November ever.
But if nearly everything's done on pre-orders, it might. I mean, obviously, I don't know when that's counted.
We can speak about that in November, I guess, can't we?
Yeah. Spoilers.
If we move on to spoilers, GTA 6 has sold really well. I'll just say that now. I'll take that and then just play that in November. What a surprise!
Bold predictions.
Bold. A little bit under the radar here, but I've got a sneaking suspicion Rockstar's going to have a really good year. Not to make light, someone who's not having a good year. The independent studio behind Disco Elysium, of course, and more recently Zero Parades for Dead Spies. Had a rough few years and for various reasons, but this latest restructuring will place 32 members of staff at the studio at risk. A ripple in this, which I think is nice to acknowledge, is that the management of the studio is currently actively negotiating with the Zar Workers Alliance, which, if you're unaware, is the UK's first officially recognised game developer union. We're seeing, I think, not that the situation's nice, but it's nice to see that the reason why these things are created and exist is to help people in these situations, and that's being respected by the studio. Yeah, I know, Alex, you were talking before how you haven't really played too much of Disco Elysium, but you really like the style of it.
I've started it 3 times, and it's just, I really like what it's doing. Whenever I have time to play games, I do not have enough. And maybe it's my own poor choices. I feel like the Inland Empire is a lot of information that you maybe don't need in the moment when your own brain is talking to you. Suddenly, Disco Elysium's inner monologue is competing with my own inner monologue, and it all gets a little heavy.
There's just too many conversations going on.
Exactly. There's too much going on at once. But I love what they did with that. I don't think that's controversial anyway to say.
No.
And I love...
Got another bold take.
I know.
Disco Elysium is a really good game. Breaking news.
And obviously they're going through a lot of... they've gone through, since the launch of Disco Elysium, since I think before the director's cut, have been through a whole lot of like fractures and issues, and Zero Parades for Dead Spies, as you say, it underperformed commercially. I'm not sure. I saw it on Steam and didn't realize it was them. Didn't make that connection at all. I don't know if I feel like maybe they made a mistake with maybe a mistake with the key art, which made it feel very different. Like Disco Elysium's thumbnail looks a lot like the game, that kind of painterish thing. And I think if they'd evoked that, I would have far more easily spotted it. But I'd missed the game essentially.
Interesting.
Which means I wasn't paying. I've seen it, brushed over it, because all I saw was the thumbnail, and kind of kept going. On me, absolutely.
It's interesting.
But I think things like that really speak to that awareness, and then it underperforming does make sense with that in mind.
Well, this is, again, I never like it when we speak about something before an episode, and then we have to refer back to it. But we had a conversation just before we started about this story, and one of the things we spoke about was that, without going into too many details, there's been a lot of like splinter studios, a lot of fracturing of relationships in the aftermath of the launch of Disco Elysium. And there's a situation where you've got 2 or 3 studios who are all pushing a media narrative that they're making either the successor, the spiritual successor from the team, from parts of the team who gave you Disco Elysium. And I feel that if we're coming out and saying Zero Parades didn't perform well enough to sustain the studio as it is, I can't help but think that's a consequence of making one fan base split up into 3 different directions in a time when people are less willing to buy multiple games, to support multiple games. I'm aware that not all of those games have come out in this window, but I still think it's something where we have to consider that you've had one great game which has built a massive audience, and you've ended up in a situation where the studio who's made not the sequel, not the successor, but the follow-up in terms of catalogue, is doing so, and 2 other studios are doing the exact same thing. It's a very unique situation, but that's
absolutely
that's my take.
I mean, critically, it's performed well. Like, it's 83, which is certainly nothing to be sniffed at on Metacritic. Looking now, honestly, probably now that I know, more inclined to go and buy it. So doing our bit there.
There we go. One more sale.
Yeah. But it is complicating when you can't carry through that legacy and communicate that legacy effectively. And obviously, as I say, we're like PhD students who know more and more about less and less. Because we often get sucked into just like knowing about the games we're working on. So if something pops up, and it's occasionally we'll miss things that are big. So if somebody's out there screaming like, it's been huge, apologies. But either way, it hasn't sold well enough. And the questions really of these 32 people who are in negotiations about being let go.
Potentially
32 people. That's obviously now a game to come out. We often see teams downsize during that. Like, there might be team members that just won't be necessary moving forward, or, the like project and work like that. But even with that in mind, it's a huge number of studio. Their website says they have over 100 staff. Looking on LinkedIn, it's hard to judge exactly. But I'd be saying it's probably a quarter of the team that are being let go, which is a huge number to be cut from a studio like this. And it probably speaks to the fact they're either going to be making more scaled projects moving forward, or just going to be reducing.
Well, I think they have to. I mean, the last thing I'd say before we move to our last story for today is that the leaders of the studio have been very clear about the fact that Disco Elysium did really well. There was a moment of, whoa, let's do this, let's do that. They wanted to do an expansion. There was reportedly multiple other projects being worked on internally, which balloons the team. And then as they get cancelled, and as things narrow down to focusing on just Zero Parades, and then you launch it, like you've said, you end up with these really big reductions, and it's sad. It's obviously a huge shame. I don't, especially if it's not performed where they were potentially expecting it to be, then it feels even more inevitable that you lose people, because the last thing they'll want to do is start working on something and then have to scale back because they need to cut the size of the team. And now in 6 months' time, if that happens again, I'm going to look like a bit of a muppet. Yeah, I've already predicted GTA 6 will do really well, so I can't get everything right.
There you go. Yeah. 50-50. 50-50 Tom, that's what we call you.
Yeah. That makes me sound like a loaf of bread, doesn't it? I'll take it.
There you go.
Anyway, should we move on to our last story, Alex? Which isn't about bread.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's been a few weeks since, well, it has been a few weeks since Sony came out and announced that they were ending production of discs. The backlash online has been, I say incredible, not from a perspective of it's amazing, but just in terms of the scale, an incredible scale of backlash. I've seen, by all accounts, conversations have been happening between Sony and some of their partners who are saying, stop promoting our things because we paid for really optimistic and hopeful engagement, and all we've got is people saying make discs again under the comments. So definitely something that's affecting Sony online. But we've now got new data from Circana, Matt Piscatella, who I refer to a lot. He's a very good industry analyst. But he's come out with two really quite shocking things, I think. One of which is that so far this year, only 7 PS5 games have sold over 100,000 physical units.
First party
in the US.
PS5 games.
No, not first party. This is across any physical game that's available to buy on the PS5. Only 7 have sold 100,000 physical units in the US so far this year. And then in the week ending July 11th, so just looking at a smaller snapshot, only 2 games on the PS5 sold over 10,000 physical copies. So we've had this conversation already, Alex, about what we think about this, but I think my question to you is, does data like this make it really hard, as much as people can be outraged at the decision? Does it make it really hard to try and act like it's not the right decision? Because this just feels so, from a business perspective, this kind of data demonstrates exactly why Sony's doing this.
Yes, I think, and I've been
awesome. Right,
this continues to kind of sit in my mind, and it absolutely explains why. I think the issue overall is, when the PS6 comes out, if there's no physical drive, that decision's made for everybody. But I think while there's still a physical drive, I think there's a real question of, indies or whomever who want to produce something physical still require Sony to give them the specific discs. And I think that's now my kind of sticking point on this. People that still want to service that market are now having that ability removed from them. And I look now and there's still, I get alerts and things about physical Game Boy games and stuff still being made in this kind of like really weird space that is still out there for homebrew stuff.
Quick shout out to our friends at Debug Magazine at the indie showcase we went to last week during Develop. They were selling the Dreamcast games. So it's does it I know that you've become a lot more digital. Again, this is conversations we have. When because we do play games, we try to, we buy them at least.
Very generously, sometimes people send me gifts of games, and I'm like, that's lovely. Why isn't it digital? I am
I'm not
the most ungrateful. I'm very, very grateful of them.
But my concern is that it's going to become only like limited run games, super rare games. It's going to become something where physical games are only made,
but they still need
to order by these boutique.
But
publishers.
They still need PlayStation to supply the specific discs. That was the beauty of Dreamcast.
So Sony will continue to do that then?
No, at least that was my understanding. And again, this is going back around to the beginning one where I didn't know where.
But this is the problem, though, and I think this is a valid issue, though, is Sony haven't clarified anything about what this looks like.
What they said in the initial statement was anything produced physically prior to the end of 2026, 2027, 2027.
Yeah, January 28 is the...
January 28, yeah. So anything after that, they will not be supplying discs for. They will reallocate discs for continued runs and production of things that have already been put into it, but not. Now, if limited run and people like that cut a deal, that means they still can get there. I think that it doesn't solve the problem for the people who care. which, as I think we were just saying, and I'm one of the people that doesn't really. But, on their behalf, I'll say I think that solves part of the problem. If Sony decide they don't want to produce their games physically anymore, that's Sony's decision. I think where the kind of sticking point comes is if limited run, or even go bigger than that. If we'd gone, I don't want to say Rockstar because they have enough to make a change. But let's say, what's a game that sells moderately well? Do they exist anymore? Are you either a blockbuster or you not? I can't think of any.
Right,
Pragmata.
500 to a million,
Capcom,
one.
Pragmata, say they wanted to just, they're doing Resident Evils. They're like, yeah, we've got the clout to do it with Resident Evil. We want to do it with Pragmata, which, blew up. And that option's taken from them because of this deal. And I think it's removing the options for people selling and that, limiting that space. So
I do think,
conflicted sense,
a lot of this comes back to Sony have not even gone, well, they have gone quiet, but there's not been anything on Sony's side coming out about this. Apparently there are Alana Pierce, who has worked with Sony on the God of War series. She has, again, not that she's WhatsApped me about this is me reading information that I see online, so I've not got an in-the-know source, but by all accounts, Sony has gone full alert, issuing really strict guidelines on how any employee can talk about this, whether it's on social media, whether it's publicly, because of the backlash. And I don't know. I get,
this shows why.
I get the anger. I think the problem is the data says something completely different. I don't like the fact that Sony have done this because it worries me that I don't think Xbox really care at this point, but it worries me that Nintendo would eventually look and say, okay, well, we'll do it as well.
My issue sits far more with, I think my only remaining issue with it is two things. Parents or family that buying gifts. I hate giving people codes as gifts. I think it's just such a sad thing when, can you imagine the N64 kid running down the stairs and opening an envelope with a receipt inside with a number printed on it? It's just not the same vibe.
No,
but then
it's
also,
true. But get on the soapbox and say it because it's true.
Yeah,
you might as well just forward an email to me at that point. There's no...
And to think of how that actually moves forward, and I know kids are getting more into digital, and maybe I'm ascribing some Gen X.
Here come the boomers. Me and you just wandering in.
Not quite that bad. And you're definitely a millennial.
I'm including myself. I
know you are. I know you are.
Because you know where I stand.
But that's when you kind of grow this affection for the hobby, and that's going to be removed. Like it is that excitement when you're young. It is that, obviously you still get the first console, but then you lose that reinforcement. But you use that kind of reinforcement of love of the hobby, and I do.
Yeah, you don't have a library.
I wonder how it's going to shift things. Yeah. But I said there were two reasons. Yeah, for that same group, the ability to share games and to pass them between each other. I think that being lost is truly sad.
Well, that's something that there's another story to do with this about the secondhand market that I just didn't touch on because of time. It will be, and I feel like I'm doing lots of this cross promoting now. It will be in our written newsletter, which is all about the potential secondhand market that Sony could kill, essentially.
Yeah.
Through this, but no, you are 100% right. And again, to me, I get why Sony are doing what they're doing right now, but they need to come out at some point and address these things. It's the same like digital ownership. If you're going to do this, what does ownership of the games you buy look like then? Because you're forcing people they have to get a digital copy whether they like it or not. And I know that people say, well, even with a physical one, you don't really own it and all these things, but at least you've got the disc there to use. But yeah, we'll see what happens when Sony speaks on this. But I think from quite a negative story, Alex, what I'd like to do before we take a quick look at one more story, and I hope I haven't sprung this on you, but I'm looking at our events we've got coming up. Again, another section of the newsletter. We like to talk about events. I want to make sure that people know what events have got coming up. Now, the next big one that you're also going to be at, so you can give us the inside scoop when you come back, is China Joy. In Shanghai. So a quick minute or two, what are you expecting from the event? Are you looking forward to it? China
Joy is kind of wild. Anybody that's been to it will testify to this. It's very like every other show you go to. If you've been to Gamescom, it's very similar to that. If you've been to any big event where you've got like big stages, like they're all around, but generally those big stages at the events I've been to previously have been like, what's the best way to explain it? like show, like just a static kind of showing what it is, like a big statue or like a facade that makes it like this, and maybe there'll be somebody that comes out occasionally and yells at you.
A little chat.
Yeah, exactly. Like fires a t-shirt can or something in your direction.
One of us.
Yeah, China.
You want to come look at this? Quick, come on, quick.
China Joy's often, not always, but many of the, I think it's 5 or 6 halls for the consumer side. They're kind of stages lined up facing each other. And on one side, an idol group will come out and start singing. On the other side, an idol rock group will come out and start playing live. And it's just like across the middle of it. And you're sat in the middle, like walking down it, being like, "Oh, this is just a cacophony."
Headphones in.
Yeah, so it's
not playing music, but just to dull out the noise.
Events are always loud. They're always a cacophony. But China Joy really is
special.
Like walking into, I mean, when I lived in Japan, the arcades and pachinko parlors there just felt like hitting a wall of noise when you went in. This is that to like a degree I can't even fathom.
Oh, delightful. Well, for that reason alone, I'm glad that I won't be joining you because I am allergic to noise.
No, I'm excited.
If anyone ever speaks to me at a conference, you can look forward to only facing my ear because I cannot hear anything. Yeah. So that sounds like my worst nightmare. But no, I'm looking forward to. Obviously, you won't be here next week, but when you return, you'll definitely have to share some stories. And who knows, you might go. Alex did go viral in China last time he went.
It was the first time. It wasn't last time. It was the time before. Yeah. We went for a walk.
Well, you might have gone viral. We don't know, but Alex was interviewed and also
stopped for an interview on the Bund.
Yeah, but anyway, the last thing we'll look at today, and I think preservation is such a big topic at the moment. And I had a look through. I thought I was like going to share my screen then and show people. No, I'm not doing that. But I found an archive, courtesy of the Video Game History Foundation, of E3 footage, meetings, notes, ticket information, and it's something that we'll include a link to in the description because I really recommend people go and have a look at this. And what are you giggling at?
I'm wondering how they got them because I don't know if you remember just before the last one of these, there was a huge blow up because the organizers just left the email and like contact list for absolutely everybody as a random spreadsheet online. This is before you started working at Big Games Machine.
This is,
but it was just kind
donated
of like
by, I'm clearing my name, donated by founding IDSA member Carolyn Rauch. This collection includes over 1,000 pages from the history of the E3, E for All, and the Game Marketing Summit. But there's some amazing stuff in there. I think the best thing is I saw the video of when the PlayStation price was announced and like the $299 moment. So a really fantastic resource. Not really much to speak about here, but I definitely recommend people go and check it out. We've just been speaking about physical media disappearing. Preservation is so important. And I have to shout out again the Video Game History Foundation because they are doing very good things. And I think for anyone who, Alex, I know you have experienced the kind of hype of free. I think luckily I was able to get on that as well. I think anyone who didn't experience E3, whether there or online, when it was at its peak, to do the boomer thing again, there'll be never anything quite like it. There'll never be anything like it.
I mean, it's one of the big shows I've never been to. Like I've done TGS, I did Gamescom. I kind of regret that it kind of died the year we were kind of considering going.
We'll look through this stuff and you can
relive it,
enjoy it. Yeah. But yeah, on that note, I think that's where we'll finish for today. Alex, do you have any closing thoughts before I do all the fun promotional bits? Brilliant. I love it when you keep your closing thoughts really short. That's fine.
We've covered so much today.
We have, but in quite good time as well. I'm happy with what we've managed to get in today. But as always, if you have listened to the episode, if you've watched the episode and you've enjoyed it, please do subscribe, like. If you have any questions, anything to add to these conversations, leave a comment too. If you are interested in checking out our weekly download newsletter, we lift a lot of the same stories that we cover in the podcast, but as I've said before, we look at them in more detail. We add more analysis. We give you a bit of a better picture of how things look. There's also other details in there, upcoming events,
Tom fact checks all the things that I throw out, and I'm like, I seem to remember
I'm frantically
that the
scrambling.
Cost was spread. Fact check up in the corner. Boop.
No, it's very much a supplementary. I was going to say reading material. It's like we're in a lecture hall, but well worth checking out. You can find that. You can find our Substack. I'll link that in the description as well. And I think with that, we'll say our goodbyes. Alex, we'll send you off to China, not immediately after we wrap this episode, but shortly after.
I need to stop
for joining me.
My pleasure. Pleasure's
always mine. Well, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.